don't want to set the world on fire. Right, so just thought I'd give a little commentary on Barbie versus Oppenheimer. So, as many of you well-cultured first world denizens are well aware, there's this very interesting battle in Hollywood going around that everyone's talking about. I mean, maybe people could argue that it's not necessarily a battle, but just two films. But yeah, let's admit it. It's pretty much a battle.
The ultimate fight to the death.
Barbie versus Oppenheimer. You know, before I begin, I just want to say something quite fun. A few days ago, my good friend Charlie, who has his own TikTok account, he showed me and my friend Brooks this really funny TikTok video where it was like this parody advert and it was like, now you can get an Oppenheimer Barbie doll. Now you can set off nuclear bombs too. Oh, but watch out for tears in the clothes unless you get nuclear exposure. And the kid playing with the doll, like, oh man, and then replaces the arm with like this ugly mutated arm. And there's a bomb that like blows away a Barbie home. Like, it's so messed up, but it's so funny. Anyway, I just, yeah, that was quite funny. Anyway, so what is going on here? Basically, there have been two summer blockbuster films. I mean, there's been other summer blockbuster films as it happens. There's been Mission Impossible 7, which I've talked about in a previous live stream on this channel. And now Hollywood seems to be going through this phase of like Barbie versus Oppenheimer. Now you might think, oh, but what about other films? Like, what about Indiana Jones 5? Okay, look, that film has been declared the worst in the franchise. It's never going to live up to Indiana Jones 1 and 3. It never will. Indiana Jones 1 and 3 are classics that can point to the logos in certain ways. I mean, I've pondered through this, and I think this way, and I'm open to correction on that, but Indiana Jones 5 is really bad. And I should note that we're living in a time and era where Hollywood's gotten rather, well, most of Hollywood has gotten rather blatant with its woke political messaging, and a lot of people are saying, no, we've had enough. I've had friends and family ask me, well, what's going on? Why aren't people seeing this film? Like, I'll talk about that at length later, but to make a long story short, people are wisening up to certain messaging in certain films that could pose us a problem for genuine growth of character. So anyway, might as well talk about the movies at length, because I actually went to see Oppenheimer lately, and it is a brilliant film. I've heard other people say they liked it too, although Critical Drinker here said that whilst Oppenheimer was a massive improvement over Tenet, Critical Drinker reckoned that Oppenheimer still had a few flaws, mainly from Nolan as a filmmaker, in that and Critical Drinker thought there wasn't enough emotional connection with some of the characters, and the film dragged. I agree that the film kind of dragged a bit, Critical Drinker says Nolan has a tendency to over-intellectualize some of his movies. So but he said, and overall, it was a great movie. So, what's my opinion on Oppenheimer? It's, I mean, I knew going in that this was going to be this, this sort of a biopic film about one of history's most controversial figures. To some, he could be a hero. To others, he could be a villain. But I think we can all agree that Oppenheimer was just a very, very flawed individual who seemed to have suffered a lot of regret. It's very clear that Oppenheimer was known as the father of the atomic bomb, and according to the film, which is mostly historically accurate, as far as I'm aware, Oppenheimer made the atomic bomb purely as a scientific exercise. He didn't like the fact that the bomb was responsible for taking so many lives, but at the same time, during that time period, the pressure was on to make a bomb of that capacity before the Nazis could. Not to mention, with Oppenheimer and some of his fellow scientists like Einstein and Heisenberg, I think, having Jewish roots, they had a bone to pick with Hitler. So they thought, right, let's get on with it. But Einstein thought, no, you can't like, what was it, split the atom or something like that. How did it go again? Like, Heisenberg split the atom, so Einstein was wrong. It's interesting. My friend Brooks and Brooks was showing me this this history thing about the secrets of quantum physics, and this host was like experimenting around a bit with some experiments. Experimenting around with some experiments. Duh. And some of it's quite questionable, but the point he was trying to make was that the tests that he said proved that Einstein was wrong and this other scientist was right, and that quantum physics isn't as straightforward as it appears. It's almost as if quantum physics has something of a will of its own, which could possibly give some credibility to George Lucas's midichlorians. So what's the point I'm going through with this? Is that the thing is, as genius as Einstein was, he can be proven wrong, as is the case with like the atomic bomb. And there's moral implications as to what this could do. And all throughout the film, like, we see these wonderful yet scary visions of nuclear atom energies, and Nolan, he's a filmmaker who loves, and I mean loves, his practical effects. So I think behind the scenes he was using like some kind of like filming a telescope to, just to get these artworks that we call film, and to have these electric signals we call sound. Like, he really loves playing around with visuals and sound. The visuals and sound are really stark. Like, Nolan's playing around with practical effects to show literal scientific things, just to help us understand the thought process of Oppenheimer. And there's other symbolic visuals, like such as the stress he feels, such as when everything's like shaking around him, as if a bomb was going off, and you hear these sound effects from different events in his life. It's really smart filmmaking. It really delves into like the psyche of Oppenheimer. It's really well done, really, really well done. And Nolan has single-handedly managed to create one of the most intense cinema, like pieces of cinema in history, like the actual bombing of the nuclear bomb. It's just one of those moments where it kind of takes your breath away, and I can understand why people like insist you need to go see this on IMAX. Honestly, if I were to see this film again, I would just want to see it on IMAX, just for that one scene where they set off the atomic bomb. Like, it's incredible. The way the music was handled, the way almost all the sound drops to just mere breaths of anticipation, to you see the glow of the bomb, and then a few seconds later you don't hear like any booming things until the after effect goes boom, and just everything just kind of crumbles, and everyone's in the aftershock. And then you just see this mushroom cloud that is like the nuclear bomb, and then everyone's like, "Woo, we did a great job!" Now, Critical Drinker said, if the film ended round about that point, that would have been a solid movie. But one of the problems I have with the film that I agree with Critical Drinker on is that Oppenheimer stretched on a bit longer than necessary. Although other people say that was kind of justified because it was all about the legal life of Oppenheimer, and I do like the fact that the film is told in a non-linear order, and still making a cohesive narrative, as if Oppenheimer was looking back on his life. Something else I really like about Oppenheimer is the fact that some bits are filmed in black and white, and other parts are filmed in color. Now, at first I thought, oh, the present moment must be just like representing the film technology that they had at the time. You know, their filmmaking was primitive, and filmmaking, as I've found out lately, the actual filmmaking process, it's just making a series of artworks, imprinting them into film, and the sounds are just like digitally and electronically writing down electric echoes to repeat to the audience. Like, you know, this kind of technology is grown over time. It's very insightful to learn that sort of thing. But the reason Nolan filmed some bits in black and white and some bits in color, to my surprise, wasn't specifically because oh, this color happened in the past and this black and white stuff is in the present and future because it represents the filming technology at the time. That because there were some scenes that were repeated in color as opposed to black and white. So I found out from Christopher Nolan himself that the reason why he did that was because the black and white scenes are actually historically accurate, as in this is what actually happened in history, beat for beat. But the colored scenes are up for subjective taste. So there's a bit of creative liberty put into the scenes of color, and I think that's a very clever way of approaching your filmmaking, and that's why I like Christopher Nolan as a filmmaker. He's very smart, like, and he's the kind of director who knows that his audience can catch on to his filmmaking techniques. Now, obviously, Nolan can get a bit carried away at times, like with Tenet. I mean, I enjoyed Tenet back when we were starving for good entertainment back in the early phases of the pandemic, or just good cinema. But Tenet. But Oppenheimer is tame in comparison to Tenet. There's we live in a day in Hollywood where a lot of people, like especially in the Hollywood elite, are practically rewriting history for their own political agendas. Like, for example, the sort of Netflix docudrama Cleopatra. They depict Cleopatra as an African citizen, even though actual history says that Cleopatra was actually of Greek ethnicity and Greek descent. Now, we have like busts and historical records and other things declaring this as absolute fact, but here you have this Hollywood elite saying,
I don't care what they say, girl. Cleopatra was black.
like they're prioritizing their feelings above just trying to tell a story. And Nolan, he's smart enough to just tell events as it is. He has no overt agenda. He just wants to tell a good story, and that's the difference between something like Oppenheimer and something like Netflix's Cleopatra. Here, Nolan is just telling. Nolan is having creative liberties, but not at the expense of what actually happened. He's just trying to dramatize what happened in a way that still stays true to history. But with Cleopatra, it's clear that it's made by people who are pretty butthurt and want to be the center of attention. But not Nolan. He's smarter than that, and that's what I like about Nolan. It's interesting that a film like this is coming out now, in a time period where so many people are having all these thoughts, and there's all this trouble going on at Hollywood right now, and I've heard people like talk about Oppenheimer as the kind of person who was playing around too much with dangerous stuff until it was too late. It's like a Faustian bargain, and this clip here of J. Robert Oppenheimer quoting like the Hindu scriptures, it's historical stuff. I mean, you could just see the regret on his face, and it's the kind of, and that kind of regret is deeply embedded in the film itself. Like, I love how the film ends with this rather ambiguous ending. He's in a non-linear format, but it's a scene where Oppenheimer is talking to Einstein, and what Nolan said about why he filmed certain bits in color, pardon me, and why he filmed some bits in black and white. I look back and I think that's actually quite genius, because Robert Downey Jr.'s brilliant portrayal of this political character, like in the black and white scene, he's ranting on about the impact of Oppenheimer, and a part of him is haunted by pondering what exactly did Oppenheimer talk to Einstein about to give Einstein this frowny look as he was passing him by. So that, because of what Nolan said about his color code in this film, the black and white is what really happened, but in color, note that Oppenheimer and Einstein were talking about you know that fusion reaction? I think the chain reaction, I think we found it. And because it's filmed in color, because of the way Nolan talks about it, Nolan said the bits in color are purely up to subjective taste. So in a way, we still don't actually know what Einstein and Oppenheimer actually talked about. So this is just a pondering of Oppenheimer, but for the sake of this creative adaptation, it still stays true to what was going on, and it provides us with a haunting ending about what Oppenheimer has done and the sort of Faustian bargain that he's done. And it ends with Oppenheimer self-reflecting in a rather terrified manner, and we cut forward to the future, kind of like a Revelation prophecy, that these nuclear rocket ships are gonna like bomb other countries, and Cillian Murphy has been really well casted as Oppenheimer. He sort of resembles Oppenheimer's physical features, and there's something about Cillian Murphy's face. He has the kind of face where it looks a bit odd. It's oddly plain in a way, but there's this strange kind of like, it's a quiet intensity. The way he sort of stares at things, like it's almost as if he's looking at something beautiful and terrifying at the same time, and he almost can't quite put it to words. Like, that's the kind of look he kind of has. So that's a really interesting, it's kind of interesting when directors hire actors for their physical properties, like with what Sergio Leone did back in The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. He hired this actor as the bad because of his hawk-like appearance, and so on and so forth. Anyway, let's play this clip because I think this speaks volumes on the tone of the film, as well as just how messed up of a life Oppenheimer has. And you've probably seen it before, but for the sake of this conversation, we might as well watch it.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." I suppose we all thought that one way or another.
I suppose we all thought that one way or the other. Gosh, doesn't that just speak volumes about like the human condition that Nolan is talking about throughout this film? I think it just speaks volumes about what kind of a person he was, and the ambitions that people have. Like, I was watching this film with a bunch of friends, and one of them didn't even know that this was a historical biopic going in. And they were saying, "Oh, who was the hero? Who was the villain?" But the thing is, this is the kind of story where it admits humankind as a whole, more often than not, are their own worst enemies. Now, does this mean I endorse grey morality and justify evil acts? No. That's not what I'm saying. That's not what I actually said in the conversation. It's just trying to make a point. The point is, humankind are often their own worst enemies because we have this habit of seeing ourselves on this pedestal as if we have no accountability to anybody else. Like, this is something that my friend Brooks would have referred to as the reptilian brain. This part of us that's the sort of fight or flight response, this sort of carnal selfishness that it could be what Carl Jung referred to as the shadow. It's basically this innate selfishness that people have, and people will often distort it to elevate themselves, because clearly I'm not as bad as this person. It's far easier to point the finger of blame to other people when we should be, more often than not, pointing that finger to ourselves if we want to truly be make a difference to ourselves and be accountable. Now, I suppose admittedly there's been a lot of fears and stuff like that I've been wrestling with, but I've managed to overcome them by saying, okay, just stay true to the evidence. But anyway, going back on topic, I was talking to the people and it's my friends, and I was just pointing out that's just the way life is at times, and I suppose it's appropriately reflective of Oppenheimer himself, a very troubled individual. And you just think, well, perhaps if Oppenheimer had been more cautious about his ambition for science, he probably wouldn't have gotten himself in this situation. Like, I know people will say, oh, but the situation's complicated, he had to build it before the Nazis did, but correct me if I'm wrong, there was a part in the film where they said, oh, the war's over, Hitler's won, and then Oppenheimer decided to make the bomb anyway, and then they used that bomb to bomb several places in Japan. Yeah, pretty messed up stuff, but a lot of people seem to be having warm, open reception to it, including Tyrone Magnus here. Let's hear a bit about his opinion.
I'll give you a review of it. Now, I'm a Christopher Nolan fan. I'm a Robert Downey Jr. fan. I am a fan of good acting.
Aren't we all?
And this film is 3 hours.
Yeah, I think I think this film could have benefited from having a theatrical cut and an extended cut. I think Nolan could have easily have satisfied audiences by just maybe like cutting out the vast majority of like political like talking scenes. It's not that they're not important. It's just that in regards to pacing, a lot of people could just start drift and just think, when is this movie gonna be over? I get it. Yeah, I get it. He had affiliations with communism and other characters saying they're hostile. I get it. Can we just get on to the next part now? I think Nolan could have been happy with like the full edit that he got. In fact, maybe he could have had a theatrical version of Oppenheimer. And then, later on down the line, he could have released an extended version of the film to theaters if people wanted to see it. That could have made for more runtime. I suppose to be fair, like, the political talking points might be justified because the film is named after Oppenheimer himself, not the bomb that he made, so keep that in mind.
Of good to great acting. Good to great directing.
Oh, yeah.
Shots, color grading, all that good stuff. But it didn't have to be 3 hours. Oh boy.
Oh boy.
There are, every director has their fans that, just absolutely love every single thing that they do and they can't do wrong and all this.
I'm just like waiting for like a news outlet for like that one like Nolan worshipper who's like, that filmmaker can never do anything wrong. All hail Inception.
This other stuff. I remember that when what was that movie that came out that Nolan did, the war movie, where there wasn't a lot of dialogue whatsoever. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Well, I got attacked for it. Whatever. It's being a YouTuber. Get blocked. Welcome to the block party. But
yeah, welcome to the block.
It was kind of the same here with stuff. While that one had no dialogue. Dunkirk. While Dunkirk had no dialogue, this one had plenty of dialogue.
I mean, that's not entirely true. I mean, Dunkirk had like minimal amounts of dialogue.
It just, man, it was long and you felt the length. Pun intended. That's what Nasty Nate said. However, though, I mean, I couldn't be mad at the acting. The acting was, I enjoyed myself to an extent, but at a certain point, and certain points, you are bored. Your mind does wander. You're like, good Lord. It's one of those things, a coffee snob will sit down and enjoy a cup of coffee. I don't know.
I probably should have taken a few snacks with me during extended amounts of scenes in there. No, I wouldn't call watching the film a waste of time. I just think it could be shortened, that's all.
They will drink. It'll take them 20-25 minutes to drink a cup of coffee. A lot of us, it's only going to take us around 5 minutes to drink that cup of coffee.
Yeah, you take that time drinking that coffee as you're watching this film. You're going to need it. You're going to need to savor every last sip. It's like Ray Fiennes in the menu. Don't eat. Taste. Savor.
That's what it kind of feels like here. I feel like there are going to be people that are going to go to this movie. They're going to be the connoisseur, the movie dialogue, the connoisseur. And they will... Lovely. Lovely. That scene was lovely, wasn't it?
Big Ben.
And I think there's going to be people there are going to go... Nolan fans are going to go, and there's going to be two sides of it. It's going to be his Dark Knight fans, and there's going to be his Dunkirk fans. And I think that his Dunkirk fans are going to absolutely love this and call it a masterpiece.
Yeah, especially considering that Dunkirk and Oppenheimer are more actual historical films, whereas I'm sure that people who lean more towards like the Dark Knight kind of films are probably more into like the well-paced thrillers that Nolan has made ever since the start of his filmmaking career, like with Memento, The Prestige, Inception, and some other movies he's made.
And his Dark Knight fans are going to go see it and be like, hey, it was good, but a little too long, Nolan. That's how I feel about it. It was good, but a little too long.
Yeah, pretty much. We could go on and on about other things, like the characters themselves are really well cast. Like all these actors named up here, like Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, all of them are really well cast in their roles, and all of them like really give their best performance. And I'm really pleased that Robert Downey Jr.'s doing well in the performance outside of the MCU. Like we've all loved Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Iron Man. It's good to see like Robert Downey Jr. branch out in a bit that still finds a success, because it's a really intricate thing. It must be really intricate doing casting, because you have to find the right people to play the right roles. And of course, some actors can really surprise you with what they're capable of in terms of like vocal range and the characteristics they can take on. So there is all that going for it. So what about the Barbie film? I wonder, why is it that people are saying Oppenheimer will save Hollywood, but some of these other people are beginning to think, hang on, there's something problematic about Barbie. Where is there it is. Now, just to make it clear that people aren't very fond of the Barbie movie now, I've looked up these female YouTubers just so I'm not called a misogynist. Because it would be so easy to like refer to like the Critical Drinker's review of Barbie, and then people will go, "Oh, you're a man! You don't understand! It's just a fun chick flick!" Ah, but how come these women also disagree with the quality of the Barbie film? Think about that. Anyway, what is this Barbie film all about? So essentially, this Barbie film featuring Margot Robbie, who played Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad, as well as Ryan Gosling, who many people will know from the film La La Land, as well as Blade Runner 2014. I've still yet to see the Blade Runner sequel. Me and my dad really loved the first Blade Runner film. Essentially, the film is about Barbie in like Barbie Land, and how the Barbie doll's been like getting people away from traditional roles of like motherhood and some other traditional feminine virtues throughout the years, like according to like the first scene of the film. And then Barbie's having a happy time in Barbie Land, and Ken is like a useless guy whose only job is beach. And some of these female YouTubers have pointed out, actually, this very film isn't actually that accurate to the brand itself, because Ken's job, I mean, I get that Barbie was probably meant to be like a satire, but Ken's job...
The film has been getting a lot of buzz online, since it's colorful, campy, and looks like a lot of fun, which has kind of been lacking in recent films, a lot of them coming off dark and gray, even ones that are supposed to be fun and whimsical fantasies like Disney's Peter Pan and Wendy. So it seems like it would be a cool family film, kinda like Super Mario Bros. Earlier this year, which...
Yeah, that's something that Critical Drinker pointed out. It's like, it looks colorful, it looks bright and bubbly. It looked like a family film, but until you realize it's rated 12, I was like, huh, that's peculiar. Why is this very pop-colored film all about a children's toy. Why is that rated 12? As we'll find out later, there's actually something else going on behind the scenes of Barbie. And this is what I meant earlier in this recording by how people are beginning to wise up to the messaging that Hollywood seems to be having in recent years, which a lot of people, especially online, are saying, no, we've had enough. We just want good stories. So there was something that this YouTuber said somewhere.
Who are working in jobs not dominated by their gender, that also doesn't the rumors about the plot were true, with Barbie Land being a matriarchy and the real world being a patriarchy.
Basically everything that men do in your world, women do in ours. Barbie is a doctor and a lawyer, and it's so much more than that.
This setup doesn't even make sense. First of all, in their own trailers, they showed a female doctor, and Ken wasn't allowed to do an appendectomy just because he felt like it. So Barbie's saying
yeah, fairly strange messaging there already, isn't there?
to me just because he felt like it. So Barbie saying that in Barbie Land women do what men do doesn't really make sense. It also kind of feels like a erasure of female doctors and male nurses, and others who are working in jobs not dominated by their gender. That also doesn't explain why Kens don't have jobs. He also had a lot of jobs too. He's been an athlete, an astronaut, a doctor, but none of that seems to be reflected in the actual movie. And
so yeah, that's what it was. That's what she brought up. Now, keep in mind, these critiques of the film are not coming from a man, they are coming from a woman. See? I'm not misogynistic. I'm depending on female opinions to back up this case. So, as she's pointed out, and I think there's a few problematic things, like, according to this film, like, from what I've heard of the film, a brief synopsis would be, that Barbie is living the high life as this great doll, and the Kens are pretty much useless people who are just there in the sidelines just to make the Barbies the center of attention. But then Barbie realizes that her feet are getting flat, and some of her playtime sessions are not going as well because there's this thing that in the Barbie world where if the Barbie doll owners in the real world affects the state of the Barbie dolls in like the Barbie world, which could make for some interesting interesting filmmaking. That does sound like an actually genuinely creative premise, actually, I'm not gonna lie. However, this is basic, to make a long story short, this causes Barbie and Ken to travel to like the real world, and they find that compared to the matriarchal world of like the Barbie world, they end up in this highly patriarchal real world. Ken not being well used in the Barbie world, Ken being pushed aside in the Barbie world, starts to see some worth in himself in like the real world. So he then comes back as like it's kind of this Chad, only to then have the Barbies like rebel, and then the Kens are told off, and then the Kens are put back in their rightful place as like these useless people. So from what people have been cautioning, from the people who actually saw the movie, it's pretty much a man-hating movie. But you wouldn't be able to tell that just from the marketing. So people like Critical Drinker have titled his review like as the greatest lie ever told. Well, let's listen to the first things he has to say.
Now, before I dive into this review properly, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the hard work and genius PR campaign of the Warner Brothers marketing department. You guys really pulled off a miracle with this one, successfully duping all of us, including me, into believing that Barbie was going to be just another colourful, light-hearted, easygoing family comedy with some cheeky self-aware humour, ironic meta-gags, and probably capped off with a blandly inoffensive female empowerment message about girls learning the value of their own potential. What none of us expected was 114 minutes of spiteful, bitter, mean-spirited, borderline unhinged hatred of men and everything even vaguely associated with them. Barbie is like the deformed, mutated rage child of Captain Marvel, Ghostbusters 2016, and She-Hulk.
So, I'm an expert at
The 2016 film was not that good at all.
I was genuinely shocked by the sheer, undisguised contempt this film has towards 50% of the human population. Watching this film was one of the most miserable, demoralizing, unpleasant experiences I've ever had as a movie critic, and genuinely made me question where our society is heading. But the review must be done, and you know.
So yes, from what you can tell, like it appeared like something completely harmless, but the messaging of the film turned out to be something completely different, which is why you have this kind of outrage online. Like, people were deceived. Like, I understand, like, the whole point of marketing is to, like, get people to see the film. Although, I've noticed that trailers and marketing are a pretty fine line to walk across, because you can't reveal too much, but you can't exactly reveal too little either. Although, I know there's a lot of adverts that get away with, like, showing very little. Like, some franchises, they build up such a high reputation that they let some minimal images speak for itself. What would be a good example of this? It's like seeing just one item in a trailer, and then people will understand, oh, it's this thing. I'm not a Mortal Kombat fan, but that game has recently advertised some guest characters, and given the sort of reputation that game has, it showed off Omni-Man from Invincible, as well as Homelander from The Boys, and since you see those characters branded with this particular game, they don't even have to do, like, the brutal, bloody, disgusting, like, fighting stuff they have to do. Like, the fact that they're there tells you everything you need to know about what they're trying to advertise. Like, a lot of people like that kind of advertising, where you don't even have to show that much. I've seen trailers of, what would be a good example? There was a UK advert for, like, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, or what was another good example? Or trailers for, like, The Lighthouse, or, like, the first Alien movie, or like the first Gears of War trailer to an extent, or even like the Avengers Endgame trailer, where they don't show you too much, but they show you just enough to get you excited. But with the marketing of this Barbie film, on the other hand, you have a case of where they deceived you into thinking it was one thing, only to trick you into thinking it's something else. Now people could argue, but what if it's a mystery film? Well, people are expecting to have a plot twist or some kind of subversion, because in that case it's advertising a mystery. I think a good example of a mystery advert that I saw recently was the one for Murder in Venice. Wait, hold on a second. It was Haunting in Venice. I actually saw this advert as I was going to see Oppenheimer with friends. Like, it looked like a typical horror film, but then all of a sudden Kenneth Branagh's Poirot comes into the scene, into this horror film, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be another mystery film. So I like that kind of marketing, like something that looks like it's gonna be one thing, but then this character appears and you think, everything's gonna be all right. It's gonna be a mystery film, and with mystery films, people are expecting to have a plot twist or something that's in the film that people didn't see coming in the advert. That's expected. But with the Barbie marketing, it's not presented as a mystery film. It's presented as a straightforward, fun family flick. But in actuality, it's anything but. It's a rather spiteful film towards men. And people have been complaining that the Barbie film has been far too overt in its political messaging. And as a previous YouTuber pointed out before, it's rather ironic that they present, like, the Barbie is like, matriarchy rules and the real world is full of this awful patriarchy. Even though the so-called patriarchy world has female doctors. So you can't exactly call that a full-on patriarchy. If you have women in some, authority roles, there are female judges, there are female doctors, there are female headmasters at schools, there are female, females and men can have these roles in the society. Like, what happened to like the middle ground? Like, couldn't men and women just like get along? Like, whatever happened to that? Why all this spite towards men? Like, I understand that men have been jerks in the past, but that doesn't give women the excuse to lash back as a result. So people are catching on to this, and they're thinking, hang on, wait a minute. All these women like lashing back at men for stuff they did in the past? I thought we were trying to be equals here. You're just, the women who are supporting like the woke agenda, they're just trying to basically become the abusers. Like, this is not how this is supposed to work. I thought we were trying to live for equality. Like, I don't think I understand what that means. Let's watch this review.
The year is 1942, and Robert J. Oppenheimer to take over work on fast neutron calculations at the Los Alamos Laboratory for the Manhattan Project. What? Oh, darn it, wrong movie. The year is 2023, and one doll alone has crashed onto our screens in a hurricane of designer clothes, hot pinks, and hairspray to tell us that only women can rule the world. In fact, they can run it so well that they had a man dress up as a woman so it could run even better.
Brittany, well, you were thinking it. Well, you said it.
Yeah, I'll admit it, I was really pumped for Barbie. The cool brand collaborations, the fun-looking set photos, and Ryan Gosling, who I like not for his eye candy ability, but because he can actually act. Seriously, go watch All Good Things. Seeing Greta Gerwig attached didn't dull that excitement.
Yeah, Greta Gerwig's gained a fairly sour reputation as a writer.
Barbie opens up with basically everything you saw in the first trailer drop that was heavily inspired by 2001 Space Odyssey. And let me tell you, with the full narration by Helen Mirren in the background, I was rolling my eyes 30 seconds in because the entire point of this sequence was to take a dump on motherhood. If you missed the quickly skirted jab at it, then it'll definitely become apparent through the pretty lengthy shots of young girls smashing baby dolls on desert rocks, which I imagine sent the Roe v. Wade crowds into panty-drenching happiness. After this cut, we got some more narration from Dame Mirren as we see all the types of Barbies that have been made through the decades and how the creation of so many different types, including disabled Barbie and type 2 diabetes Barbie, helped rid the world of the patriarchy and make sure that every girl can be whatever they aspire. These ideals were thankfully instilled into the real world through the purchase and play of Barbie dolls. Transition into Barbie Land, which by now all of us have seen quite spectacularly through the trailers, which also basically gave away the whole first 30 minutes of this movie. Without much indication as to why, Barbie suddenly wakes up and all is not well. Her imaginary showers are cold, her milk is sour, and her feet are flat. And somehow this twit knows that whoever is playing with Barbie in the real world is having some depressive episodes that are now influencing Barbie in Barbie Land. Because this was written by an activist instead of a writer, they just kind of make shit up as they go to keep the plot going, and that's how Barbie figures out she's got to go to the real world. Ken decides to hop on this adventure because the Kens only exist to be at the beck and call of the Barbies, and joins Barbie in the real world, where it turns out the woman playing with her real world counterpart, Gloria, played by America Ferrera, is going through a pretty significant midlife crisis because her job seems to be going nowhere, and her teenage daughter is an absolute fucking bitch. Ken in the meantime discovers that the real world is run by the patriarchy, and becomes a base 10 legend for the second half of this movie, and it's here that we have the development of the actual villain, men. Anyways, Mattel gets word.
That is Will Ferrell. I wonder how the men must feel making a movie like this. A movie that overtly says all men are terrible and women are the only good thing to ever exist. How do the men feel when making this film? Something worth thinking about, I guess.
that this Barbie has escaped Barbie world, and the honchos at Mattel believe that they can get this escaped Barbie under control if they put her back in a Barbie box, which Barbie initially agrees to happily until the shackles of patriarchy shot cues in and she realizes she doesn't want to be put back in a box because freedom. Barbie tries to escape and runs into a fever dream room with an old woman in a kitchen played by Rhea Perlman, and they have tea, which ends up relieving Barbie and giving her a second win. It works, right? Barbie escapes Mattel headquarters successfully with the help of Gloria and her bitch daughter, and they all decide to go back to Barbie Land together in hopes that this will fix Barbie's issues. They get back, and it turns out Ken had returned on his own while Barbie was at the headquarters, and he brought the patriarchy back to Barbie Land, brainwashing the remaining Barbies and filled it with every masculine stereotype you can think of.
I mean, think about this logically. According to the plot itself, the Kens are reduced as lesser people. Alright, remove all your views on like gender and skin color just for a moment. Imagine you were colorblind to all skin color. Imagine you saw like men and women as exact equals. How would you view a film like this? Common sense says if one group of people is being, put to the side, and I don't just mean for the sake of being a servant, because all of us are called to be servants in a positive degree. I'm talking about cast to the side because
You're a lesser person and you don't deserve to be at the top.
what do you think is going to happen? At some point, they're gonna lash back. Like, think about it. The woke crowd keeps thinking white men suck. So, if the woke crowd who boast on inclusivity are saying white men don't belong here, now I'm not saying all of them, I'm saying like the most extreme form. Like, if they say like white men suck, what do you think's going to happen? The white men, they're gonna lash back. 1 and 1 equals 2. Oppression calls for, rebellion, I guess. Like, trying to oppress a certain kind of group, it's like trying to squash a beach ball under the water. No matter how hard you try, pop, it's gonna pop back up. So in this case, if you're oppressing one group, it's gonna come back to bite you. Like, come on, this is just common sense. I mean, whatever happened to actual equality between men and women? Although some people would correct me by saying equity, not equality. So fair enough. So anyway.
Cowboy hats, horses, guitar, beard wings, and calling girls chicks and babes. Ken has even taken over
I would not do that. Chicks, babes. No, I would not use that language.
Barbie's house, and distraught and upset, Barbie
Unless they change the name of Barbie to Baby. No, that's creepy. That's creepy.
basically has a breakdown and becomes depressed Barbie. Weird Barbie takes her back to the Weird Barbie house, and there's kind of an intervention that involves Gloria just going on and on and on about how hard her life is as a woman. Because women have so many trouble in the patriarchy and being nice.
Even though, as noted from this person, some women don't have any problem being authoritative doctors and in other authoritative roles. Seriously, this film is contradicting itself everywhere it goes. Now, keep in mind, these critiques that I'm looking at right now, they're not coming from men, they're coming from women. So, logically, if even women are not very fond of how the Barbie movie is actually turning out to be, what does that say about a movie that was purposely aimed towards women? Now, here a lot of people will probably jump in and say, oh, Callum, it's just a movie, it's just a fun movie, chill out, bro. And given the circle of people I've surrounded myself with, and rumors like whenever I hear the conversation of, oh, have you seen the Barbie movie? Have you seen the Barbie movie? Like, I'm getting the impression that people aren't expecting it to be a masterpiece. They're just going in expecting a fun movie. That's how the marketing makes it appear. That's what I hear in conversations around me. Oh, you should go see the Barbie movie. Oh, everyone should go dress up as like Barbie and Ken to watch the Barbie movie. Yeah, that does sound like a lot of fun. Because I have actually seen like people dress up in really smart outfits to go see Oppenheimer in the same way that lots of young men went in their best outfits to see Minions: The Rise of Gru. I mean, that does sound quite fun, but there's something kind of manipulative about the critique that, oh, this is just. There's something very. There's this very subtle trick that Jonathan Pajot pointed out that nihilists often make, and it's the way they use the word just. Like, oh, this is just a statement. This is just a thing. This is, oh, it's just a sword, or it's just this, or in the case of Barbie, oh, it's just a toy brand film. What's the big deal? Like, the big deal is that, look, if people are free to like critique those awful Michael Bay Transformers sequels as bad toy brand movies, people should be free to call out a bad toy brand Barbie film too, right? I mean, it's kind of interesting the extremes people go to. Like, years ago, we had the worst aspects of masculinity portrayed in the Michael Bay Transformers sequels. Not the first film necessarily, but the sequels. But then you have another toy brand film like this, which showcases the worst aspects of feminine traits. So it's interesting how the extremes kind of go back and forth throughout the years. Let's keep listening.
It's okay, because they have a plan to deprogram all the brainwashed Barbies. Get Gloria to keep bitching about all these problems until they snap out of it. And somehow this works, additionally deprogramming trans Barbies somehow. Speaking of transitions, Ken has been evilly plotting to transform Barbie Land into Kenland, and apparently the final nail will be the Kens rewriting the Barbie Land Constitution, taking away a lot of rights and autonomy.
The men are gonna take away women's rights! Oh my days, this kind of thinking is so stupid. Again, this critique is not coming from me. It's coming from a woman!
So, to distract the Kens, the Barbies decide to use their feminine wiles to turn the Kens against each other, thus leading to an all-out war that will distract them so that the Constitution rewrite doesn't happen at all. Because according to this world, men go to war because they're insecure, not because of money or land or wealth. And it works. Barbie Land is restored, Barbie rejects Ken and tells him to find himself. Barbie realizes she doesn't want to be a Barbie doll anymore and joins the real world. The film closes out with Barbie seeing a gynecologist because, you know, now that she has functioning parts, that's the first thing that she's got to do, and I'm sure all the children in both my theaters totally got that one.
I love Doug, the best owner in the world. Fetch!
Sayonara.
I don't even know where to start with this movie, so let's prime it with the positives. The sets are phenomenal. In an era of cinema where even the simplest of things are edited with CGI and special effects,
Wait, hold on. What is that? What is that? This had to have been filmed during the pandemic, right? That had to have been filmed during the pandemic. That's the only way I could justify this elaborate effort. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why? Why would you? Okay, that's going off topic. Moving on.
Special effects, it was quite refreshing to see full-scale sets of Barbie Land, and ones that genuinely felt reminiscent of all the Barbie paraphernalia I had as a kid, down to the heart-shaped waffles and drink cups. The fantasy is further elevated by the fact that they act just like how Barbies do. They don't actually eat anything, they just pretend to, same with taking showers, and they comically move around as though someone is playing with them. The soundtrack, both original and compiled, is pretty stellar as well, aside from that stupid Nicki Minaj Barbie World remake. So kudos to Mark Ronson on that one, because he generally knocks these soundtracks out of the park. Ryan Gosling is the highlight of this entire movie, down to his Matchbox 20 musical number. Who knows if he was trolling with that Braveheart story during the promotional rounds, but boy, can you tell that he is having fun with this role. Everything down to the slight mannerisms are enjoyable, and his scenes were the ones that I looked forward to. Included in that exhibition of hyper-masculinity was a pretty solid Snyder dig as well. Just wait
Man,
for a
I wish
second,
I could
okay?
mute you.
If
I mean,
he-
this is bullshit.
And despite Gerwig trying to emasculate him and paint the male species as straight-up villains, the irony of his character shines through really hilariously. But unfortunately highlights everything this movie could have been as well. Barbie has a beautiful premise that blends fantasy with reality by intertwining Barbie Land with the real world. The movie starts off pretty strong, the feminism dialogue aside, because it does a solid job of bringing those two opposites together. But it's right around the point where Barbie finds the bitch daughter at her high school and calls Barbie a fascist that you realize this movie is more set on providing you with a high production message as opposed to what could have been a really fun cinema experience.
Now, keep in mind, this woman has given a fairly balanced review. She's not gone, "Oh, this is the worst movie ever made." No. She's highlighted some positive aspects, and that's what a good reviewer ought to do. A good reviewer is the kind of person who can count their blessings with what good things are actually in the films. Like, look at the Barbie movie. Yeah, the visuals are really impressive, and it is quite refreshing compared to the bland stuff that Hollywood's been making a lot of the time. And there seems to be some genuine fun moments, and the fact that this presents itself as a satire, you know, it does show promise. So, however, it's very clear that from what these women are complaining about, it could have been so much more. If they had just focused on being more sincere, I guess, then it could have been something great.
Are regarded as failures. And this, very unsurprisingly, falls completely flat given the fact that Barbie Land was, for 99.9% of its existence, a female-run matriarchy that genuinely did treat the men like brainless and unimportant pieces of garbage. America Ferrera's character helps each Barbie to remember that they are strong and independent women. They are authors, doctors, politicians, Nobel Peace Prize winners, and so on. And this realization gives them the motivation that they need to defeat the Kens and restore the feminist matriarchy to Barbie Land. The daughter then thanks Barbie for being a white savior, but Barbie tells her no, it wasn't her who saved Barbie Land, but her mother. Because of course, in 2023, there's a popular trend of taking digs at white people. Ultimately, Margot Robbie's Barbie decides that she wants to become human and to live in the real world because she wants to live a life doing meaningful things, which is an incomprehensible ending for a few reasons. Firstly, the Barbies managed to overthrow the Kens by remembering how strong and independent and capable they are, that they're the rightful leaders of Barbie Land, that they have great accomplishments such as being doctors and politicians. But at the same time, Barbie chooses to leave this life behind because it isn't meaningful. Then, in the film's biggest self-own, instead of staying in the matriarchal society run by women, Barbie chooses to live in the patriarchal, male-dominated, oppressive, real-world society which she had been decrying the entire movie is a terrible place wherein she was made to feel sexualized, unsafe, and objectified. It's laughable, really.
So it's interesting that these things are pointed out. So basically, to make a long story short, people are beginning to catch on to these tricks that the people behind Barbie are trying to make, and people are saying, no, we're calling you out on this kind of thing. So you'll look at Oppenheimer and Barbie, and both these films are doing exceedingly well at the box office, but I predict that people only went to see Barbie because it looked like a colorful break compared to other more bland films that Hollywood have been making. but the marketing was set up in such a way that it didn't reveal the woke messaging. I think at this point, Hollywood knows that that people are catching on to their woke messaging, so they try to hide it. And the reason why they keep trying to push this woke messaging is that they're trying to appeal to what's called the ESG scores, in which they try to present themselves as moral as possible. Like Disney has been trying to do this. They in Western countries, they'll be as hyper inclusive as possible, but when it comes to trying to sell their products to places like China, they're gonna block off the inclusivity in their posters, because that way it sells to a broader demographic. And this is just downright hypocritical. And you look at stuff like this and you think, well, it's no wonder there's so many people having an outrage online. It's no wonder we are seeing these strikes and protests in Hollywood itself as of recording this. So we're living in an era where people are saying, no, we've had enough. And we just want good stories. And I genuinely believe that bad stories can make for like mentally unhealthy people and can really ruin people. So what's the alternative? The alternative is seemingly quite simple. Just tell better stories. Tell good stories. Like, understand how stories are structured. Understand character growth. Like, understand how to tell a film in which the audience can come to their own conclusions, rather than trying to cram conclusions down people's throats. This is another reason why people love Christopher Nolan. It's the sense of ambiguity that he often gives out in his films. Even in Oppenheimer, I think the fact that Nolan worked on Oppenheimer kind of gave him kind of a silver platter to work off with, because the way Nolan structures his films, he always presents his endings in a way that's it's very clear that he's trying to promote the goodness of virtue, but at the same time there's certain dilemmas in which he allows the audience to come to their conclusions. I think a good example of this, he does this time and time again, like in Inception, there's this ambiguous ending of, oh, was Leonardo DiCaprio dreaming, or is he finally wide awake? The spinning top device still spins by the time the camera cuts to blank and ends the story. And we see this in The Prestige, where this one character's done something very awful, but then the other character wins, and you're left to this conclusion, oh, which of these characters was in the right? Because the film was presenting one character as more heroic, only to then show that he was kind of a complete monster. And there's a specific plot twist in which you have to look back at the film again, just to understand it all in context. In The Dark Knight, Harvey Dent gets killed, and part of the Joker's plan was to build up this bad reputation for Harvey Dent so that Gotham City would lose its hope. So Batman decides to take the burden of blame on himself so that Harvey Dent's reputation can last for as long as it needs to for Gotham City to recover. So these kind of endings are quite ambiguous. It leaves you to think, okay, well, what was the right thing to do? Like, and I like the endings because it's very clear what the right thing is, but because we're just such flawed human beings, sometimes we do, I would hesitate probably to call them compromises, but just, I probably shouldn't use the word just either, consider what I just said. I said just again! I just said it again! I said it again! With those kind of endings, Nolan gets you to think, and it's all about trying to give hope to people, no matter the odds. And these scenarios are presented in a way that, well, it could have been handled better, but this is the best with what the characters could do. So with Oppenheimer, there's a similar treatment, and don't think for a moment that people are like extremely biased towards Oppenheimer. Like, I know, like, there's probably going to be some people out there who actually like the Barbie movie, but here's the thing: people want sensibility, even for a more family-oriented film like Barbie. They want virtue. They want stories that can make them think, stories that can help them to grow, not stories that get them to indulge, not the kind of stories that can endorse like a victim mentality. So, as I said before, Will Jordan, let's see, got it.
Sorry, mate, I'm gonna need 6 months' fares up front.
You know,
Will Jordan's also talked about this film in a way that in a way that's balanced. Like, he doesn't like blindly praise the film. He does give this film some critiques. Like, this film's not a perfect film, but I'm convinced more people are going to go back to see Oppenheimer. Yes, even with the length that it is, because whilst Barbie had the appeal at first, hence the box office rise, I think box office numbers are going to go down for Barbie, but then keep rising for Oppenheimer, because more people will have more respect for Oppenheimer, as it was a film that delivered on what it promised, mostly. But Barbie didn't quite do so, although I'm pretty sure there's people going to like the movie, but even my friend Charlie would say the nerd culture just needs a revival. Anyway.
To be known as the father of the atomic bomb, to think of a movie. You know, it's tough to think of a movie that had more expectations resting on it than Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's historical biopic about the man who came to be known as the father of the atomic bomb. Damn, that's a boss name if ever I've heard one. In a summer movie season where the term flopbuster was officially coined, and the utter dregs of human civilization somehow got condensed into movie form, I think it's fair to say that most of us were feeling pretty starved of quality cinema. But there was one beacon of hope still shining on the horizon. A chance for smarter, more patient and intellectually challenging films to reassert themselves on general audiences. Multi-layered story told non-chronologically, interweaving past and present events to form a comprehensive picture of an extremely complicated life, slavish devotion to historical and scientific accuracy, and imaginative, technically challenging filming techniques that produce some genuinely awe-inspiring moments. Unfortunately, it also provides an unchecked outlet for some of his worst tendencies as a writer, his almost obsessive need to over-intellectualize and overcomplicate everything he does, resulting in a bloated runtime and sluggish pace, characters that rely more on the strength of the actors portraying them than the coldly clinical script they're working from, resulting in a story that lacks the emotional heart needed to keep you invested, and an almost total lack of warmth and levity, resulting in a weirdly bleak, inhuman viewing experience. It's kind of the best and worst of what Christopher Nolan does. The movie begins in 1959 with the Senate documenting Oppenheimer's subsequent fall from grace, mostly centered around tedious and repetitive interrogations, dusty Senate hearings, personal grudges and betrayals, repetitive references to past events, and long somber reflections as various characters ponder the merits of their choices. All of it to basically bring us right back to the same questions we were left to ponder after the Hiroshima bombings an hour earlier. What was the true cost of this new creation? Now, it's fair to say that Christopher Nolan has a bit of a divisive reputation as a filmmaker these days, especially when he doesn't have the right people in place to rein him in. His films are a bit like Data from Star Trek, super intelligent and technically brilliant accomplishments, but lacking the heart and soul needed to engage on a fundamental human level. And like I said earlier, I certainly can't fault Oppenheimer on the first part. The film's definitely at its best during the Manhattan Project section, where you really get a sense of the fear and desperation of scientists racing against time to harness forces they barely understand. But the problem is that this only takes up about a third of its runtime. The rest is given over to everything that came before and after, most of which is told out of sequence because, of course it has to be, because it's a Christopher Nolan movie. The thing is, balancing a complex multi-decade narrative with a massive cast of characters is no easy feat, even if everything's told in sequence, but adding this extra layer of narrative complexity on top just feels like a step too far.
So there you go. People seem to be, whilst Oppenheimer's not a perfect film, I get the idea that more people are leaning more towards favoring Oppenheimer rather than Barbie. So there you go. That's my take on this whole Barbenheimer phenomenon. Now, it should be worth noting that, again, about how Oppenheimer leaves the ending ambiguous to let the audience decide on their own conclusions, whereas Barbie is the kind of film that more people wouldn't like, just hammering the conclusions down people's throats. So, what do you all think about Barbie vs. Oppenheimer? What do you think is the superior film? Well, I'll leave you to decide. God bless every single one of you, and may God enable me to use science and technology correctly. Now, if you excuse me, I've got a friend to accommodate to. Scott's Thinker signing out.